Hi there, my name's Ian Robson and I am an associate professor here in the Department of Social Work, Education and Community Wellbeing. This video is a bit about my own use of visual methods, and I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about what I've called interactive environments. So I suppose a simple way to describe that would be to think about any sort of space in which people are going to physically come together and to undertake some sort of collaborative activity, some sort of inquiry-based learning, some sort of review activity, hearing one another talk, considering issues together. So that might be in a classroom, it might be the civic centre of a local authority, it could be in a community centre, it might even be in an outdoor space. So because my work tends to be with practitioners and service users in children's services, that's usually the context for me. And my starting point is to think about the challenges that are associated with setting up that sort of environment. And for me, it's about the sort of space that people come into. Now, that's not just talking about the actual physical space and how many chairs there are and how many tables there are, but it's sort of all aspects of that encounter together. So if that sounds a bit vague, think about it in this way. Very often when people come into a room together, we sort of get into our little habits, don't we? We sit at tables, we might have agendas, we might dress a certain way, we might interact a certain way. And sometimes when we're undertaking research, visual methods in terms of thinking about how the space is laid out, the material, environment, the visual elements in the room, all can help to adjust that environment into a space where people are connecting more effectively together with one another. They're relaxing, they're having fun, they're asking questions, they're appreciating things from other people's perspectives, and they're getting to see inside other people's heads. So I contrast that with the worst sort of meetings that we can be in, or the worst sort of research encounters where people feel nervous, where people feel that they're not able to speak, where people don't know what they should be contributing, and where the natural level of communication and working together in the room isn't perhaps as good as we would want, particularly when we're qualitative researchers looking for insights to come out of relationships and insights to come out of discussions. Now, for you might not be thinking about working with a whole system in a room like I do, but you might want to think about how you would facilitate a focus group, or how you might even want to get a few people together to review some data or to generate some data. And so this idea of interactive and visual environments, you might be able to take some principles from that. Okay, when I'm putting together a space in which I'm going to invite people to do some sort of joint inquiry together, and I'm going to use visual methods in that context, I'm thinking of the fact that we want to make it easy for people to have conversations. And in particular, the contribution of visual methods is one where we can visualize the thinking. One of the problems in research is that we are trying to get an insight into people's situations, their subjective experiences, their reflections. And very often when we're trying to do it with more than one person, we want others to get to appreciate hearing from one another and understanding what other people say. So sometimes actually putting things down, whether it's writing on a piece of giant paper, whether it is choosing things and prioritizing things, is really good, because if everyone can see what's going on, we can comment on it. You might want to call it having a shared object of activity. When we're just having a conversation, that might be great, and it might flow quite naturally. But there are all sorts of reasons why conversations might not flow quite naturally, whether you're in a focus group or a learning event or anything like that. So sometimes being able to see people's ideas written down, being able to see what other people choose and how they prioritize things is really good, because you might get your participants saying, oh, well, I never really appreciated that's how they saw it. And actually, that sparked my thinking. That's given me some things to think about. So sometimes it's about keeping things relatively simple. Sometimes when we think of visual methods, we think we have to be very accomplished artists. We have to do something which is highly polished. And in my experience, providing a visual experience which is really highly polished and sort of you spent days and days and weeks on, sometimes is a bit counterproductive, because you want people to feel that they could participate in something. You don't want someone to feel, oh my goodness, I'm not creative, I can't take part in this. So that's why, after lots of years of experience of doing these things and working with visual methods in sort of collaborative inquiry, I've learned to do some of the simple stuff, because that works really well and it sets people into a more relaxed and humorous mode. So that might well be having things up that people can review and get into that headspace, and it might be reviewing things from past sessions. For example, if you've run some interviews or you've had previous discussions with a group of participants, it might be that you want to re-present them back to those participants so they can go, actually, yeah, you heard me there, that's what I said, or that's not quite what I said, this is exactly what I mean. So there's a bit of validation that visual methods can do when we use them to feed things back to people. We can prompt people to think about particular things. We can give them easy starting points. So it might well be that you set up a table with particular things on it. And some of the images in this video are showing you some of those approaches, whereby we're not asking people to suddenly launch into a very deep theoretical analysis and evaluation of their work. We're saying to them, select something that is really interesting to you here out of the information that's provided. And my work is often showing people sort of maps of areas in which they work, or different elements of the situation, which they might then go, oh, actually, yes, all of these things are going on here. And there's some other things that I would want to put in as well. So I'm a big fan of mapping in the broader sense, not just cartographic mapping, but this idea of symbolic or situational mapping that authors like Adele Clark have pioneered, where she would look at a situation and say, who or what matters here? Sometimes having a tabletop and saying to people, okay, think about your workplace, think about your practice, think about your care pathway, whatever it might be. You tell me, using the elements that are there on the table, who or what matters. And then once that's down on the table, other people can see it too. Other people can comment. Other people can contribute and add and enrich data that you might already have, or that data you collect in that session. One of the things that's really important for me is about the nature of the experience. We want people to come along and actually realize that they can open up, they can contribute. So it's about feeling safe. And you and I know that we will only really open up, share our thoughts, perspectives, and insights and questions if we feel able to do so. So it's really important that people have that opportunity, and it's seen as playful. So this idea of serious play that is associated with Lego, for example, you might be familiar with that. But that principle of serious play, really, really important. We don't stop playing as adults, or we shouldn't. And it's about giving people permission to say, have a go. There's not a right or wrong answer. And activities like selecting things, grouping things, prioritizing things are really, really useful. And rather than just say to someone, just in a really abstract way, give me a list of your top 10 priorities, sometimes it's as simple as saying, actually, there's a whole load of things that could be your priorities laid out here on the table. Why don't you select them, move them around, group them, do all of those sorts of things? We forget how important those sorts of activities are in our actual use of visual methods. Sometimes we think of visual methods as quite a passive thing. You know, I'm looking at a picture or I'm reviewing an exhibition, and there's a value in that. But in this particular example, when I'm talking about interactive environments, I'm talking about things that people can pick up, things that people can write on, things that people can throw and select and play with, so that in those activities, they're able to have a laugh, they're able to open up, they're able to sort of go into a mode of relating to one another, which is more relaxed, which is actually more speculative. And it's a bit like what if? Or providing that reflective space. So visual methods, whilst they're not going to automatically just do everything for you, they can help people become playful. They can help people remember conversations and things that they've said before, and they can help people to think visually on tabletops, on walls, by selecting things. Of course, it requires skills for us. So when you're thinking of providing an interactive environment, even if it's just a tabletop for a focus group, or for an individual that you might have interviewed once, and then you go back to that interview and say, "Can I show you some of the things that I think I've understood from our conversation?" You need to make sure that matches your skill level, and that's one of the things that's really important here, and it's reflected in the materials in this the general presentation that you've got. So make sure that you have done this method yourself. Don't ask people to do something you haven't done yourself. That you can explain it, that you feel confident with it, that you don't just assume or take for granted the skills that someone might need to do something. So even simple activities, like if you've got the expectation that people will select things and move things and group things and even annotate on a tabletop, then we need to give them permission to do that. And we perhaps need to say, well, feel free to do this, and show them examples. Visual methods can be great fun. We shouldn't overcomplicate them. They're there to help people open up. So in many cases, you might use them to elicit information. So the visual methods themselves will not be the data, but they'll help people talk. In other occasions, those visual methods, the artifacts that people create, the tabletop selections and annotations, that's going to be part of the data. And we're going to need to think carefully about how that is used. But if you're interested in more rich, relaxed, playful, curious, and reflective conversations, then it might be that you think of the use of visual methods in that sort of interactive environment.